Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. It's Monday morning and welcome to the Academy for Complex Trauma. My name's Linda, I'm your trauma recovery coach, and today we're going to talk about major depressive disorder. It's great to be back with you. I've had a week off to help get over the bronchitis, and I'm so grateful that I did. It's really helped a lot. So instead of having the 100-day cough afterwards, it's receding immensely every day because I chose rest over, pushing myself, which is often what we do with complex trauma, is push ourselves so much because that's what we had to do as children, is keep pushing and pushing just to get through what we were facing each and every day. If you're here this morning, say good day, and it's great to be back with you. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about depression is because oftentimes with complex trauma, it's something that we go into the doctor and say, look, I've got anxiety. If you can just help me get over the anxiety, I know everything will be okay. And they'll say, oh yeah, but you've got depression too, blah, blah. And for me, I went in saying, well, no, I don't have depression. I don't feel depressed. What's going on. Thank you, Katja. Great to be back. And I was adamant when I went and saw my doctor a number of years ago. I can't remember how many now, possibly 5 or 6 years ago. And I said, look, I don't have depression. I've got anxiety and it's crippling, but I don't have depression. All right, hang on a sec. Good morning, Charlotte. Thank you. Good morning, Ali and Rach. Where are you off to? On the bus travelling from Belfast International Airport to home. Yep, understand. Good stuff. Take it easy, girls, and safe flight home. Okay, so with depression, we can feel all of these things. So we can have like a gnawing agony, painful self-loathing, consuming all our attention and energy. Sometimes we can feel like it's a vortex. We feel lost in a life we can't live. A negative state which invades every part of our life and feels like we can't move at all. So we all know that state of when we wake up and we literally can't get out of bed and we go straight back to sleep, no problems at all, when we're normally going to sleep is something that's a challenge. It impacts us with an ongoing negative mood, altered sleep, appetite issues, libido, slow movements, actions. Our perception is offline, so an inability to change our thoughts, our focus direction, and we can feel like an ongoing black hole and we can't get outside of ourselves and can't connect to anyone else. And if that's you, that's okay. But I've found along the pathway with complex trauma that depression can be that way, but it can also be that we have anxiety and that's the primary concern. But where psychology and medicine's at this point in time is that if you go into the doctor and say, look, I've got crippling anxiety, well, this is what I found for me, depression's not an issue, help me with the anxiety. They make an assumption that you have depression as well, and the diagnosis will be major depressive disorder. This is what I'm going off what's happened for me over many years as well. And I used to, before the anxiety got so bad, I did used to have the depression and I did used to feel that way. But as I progressed over the years and I came to know who I am, so think back to the course, My Authentic Self, because I knew who I am, I was like, no, I don't have depression. But instead of fighting the doctor, I went on the whole journey of seeking and discovering what worked for me, so I didn't have the anxiety anymore, so I could go out and work, be able to deal and manage the anxiety until I'm at the point now where I don't have the anxiety. But then what would happen was I'd get dressed for gym, I'd be sitting in the chair, shoes on, ready to go, and the next thing you know, without me even knowing it, I'd fall asleep. And another scenario was I'd get ready, shoes on, ready to go, and I couldn't move. And it was so incredibly frustrating. And I didn't know what was causing this and why I would have this symptom of depression when I didn't feel depressed. So when we've done a lot of our internal work and we're secure in who we are, we can still have, what I've discovered is we can still have these effects of depression. So, and for some people, they can get to the point where psychology, medication, even things like shock therapy don't work and they still have major depressive disorder. So I went looking and I found online this doctor called Dr. Mayberg, and she does a TED talk. So that's Mayberg. You can look up her TED talk. And what she did back in the early 2000s was she's a neurologist, works with a team of neurologists. So they began to look at depression from the brain. And instead of saying, these are all the symptoms and this is how we can go about treating the symptoms, which is all the things that are presenting at an emotional level, they said, right, we're going to map the brain and we're going to go, right, where can we see that the circuitry is? What can we pinpoint? And they took a long time, because can you imagine how long it takes to map the brain? Because we have this concept, it's this big thing, but internally the brain is so complex. So when they began mapping the circuitry of the brain, they found an area a circuit in the subcolossal cingulate, which is in our limbic system. So remember, our limbic system is a lot related to our emotions. And in particular, area 25, they found that when they went in and stimulated that area, that it brought people out of the depression. So when it brought people out of the depression, there was two stages. So there was the initial stage of recovery of, oh, wow, I'm no longer depressed. Like, they're no longer fighting something that was out of their control. And that was good. And then they had to go in and adapt. The second phase of recovery was going in and adapting all the habits and everything that had come from the depression. So when I saw this video, I went, well, how is that going to relate to us with complex trauma, and what can we do about it? So this is one of the reasons I came about working out trauma-informed movement. So we are already aware that our prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, which we need to put our emotions into order, is disconnected when we're triggered. So when in an unconscious level, when we're triggered as an adult, it's totally out of our control, the trigger, and when we get triggered, our prefrontal cortex is offline and we're running on our emotions, all right? That's not something that we can change at this point in time, but we can work with it. So I went, okay, if all of this is offline, how do we get our prefrontal cortex back online even though we've been triggered? Because at this point in time, all of us can't be trotting off to the doctors and getting our area 25 re-stimulated. So what are we going to do? And I needed a solution, because if we don't have a solution, then we end up, in that zone without any way to manage it. I just want to show you, I got a couple of diagrams last night. Okay, so the subcolossal area is in here. So see the purple bit? Actually, I've got another one too. Wasn't sure which one was going to show you really well. Okay. So yeah, same. All right. But here's what I looked at, and I went, it's the part that goes all the way around here, and see our amygdala? Our amygdala is where all the unprocessed memories are stored. Okay, so everything that happened in our childhood that we couldn't process, it's like they're still floating around in the amygdala, like shards, mirrored shards. So when our senses take in information and one of those shards gets hit, it's the unconscious that comes forward and sets off the whole process where our limbic system and our prefrontal cortex are separated, and we're running on fight, flight, or freeze mode. And the hippocampus, which is in here, we want really to be able to have all the little shards in here processed so that they can be filed away in our hippocampus. And that's something that can happen over time. Now, so with the subcolossal area being around this area, I went, well, then it has to be impacted by the unconscious trigger as well. So if that's the case, and that trigger is, the area 25 is what we get triggered with, which is the depression trigger, then we have to have a way to have our prefrontal cortex back online in order that we can process, hang on, I'll just get a little diagram back up for you, in order that we can process all the emotions that are happening for us now, and which are in the amygdala, and we can get them stored away in the hippocampus so that our anxiety decreases, and so that when the depression goes off, when the area 25 goes off and we're triggered into depression, we have to have a way that our prefrontal cortex comes back online and we can get out of that state. And one of the things I did for that was develop the trauma-informed movement in order that we then begin to be able to manage what's happening at our brain level and we can get it back online. Now, it works. So I'll put a link down below to the trauma-informed movement group. It's free because I believe that we all need to be able to get it back online, to get the prefrontal cortex, our thinking, perception area, back working with our limbic system, our emotional center. Now, what I've been aware of is because I've been sick and I haven't done the trauma-informed movement, I can feel the heaviness in my head from both of those areas not being connected. And if you look at my last post, I looked at it this morning, I went, oh my goodness, the spelling is just terrible. And that's because it's not back online. So what do I do? What do I get to have my two parts of my brain that are vital to function back online? My first thing is breath. So the first thing you can practice is breathing. Getting used to breathing more deeply than we do when we're on hypoarousal. We breathe very shallow, and you can prove that to yourself by trying to take a breath in for 5 seconds and a breath out for 5 seconds. Do each 6 times, and that's 1 minute, and see how you go. See if you're able to focus your attention that long on your breathing, and see if you're able to say, right, I want to feel where this breath is going into my body, and I want to feel which part of my body, which part of my muscles are tight. And when you do that, you go, right, I need to start teaching myself how to breathe deeper again. Then the next thing you can do, well, what I've done over time, is I go to gym and I ride a bike. Okay, first of all, I go to gym because it gets me out, and our vision is 40% of what we take in. So we need to be getting out of the house and taking in more information in order to feel safe and be able to manage, like I did yesterday when I've been to South Bank before, but I went and did something different, met new people. Then you're able to do grounding and you're able to go, right, I'm here and I'm going to have a good time, even though my central nervous system is going to be exhausted from taking in so much new information, okay? And it's the best place to be in because you're not going out and being triggered into anxiety. You're just aware that your whole internal system is going, wow, how am I going to manage this? Am I going to be safe? So I did. I sat there and I grounded before we walked around the market so that I could get my breath into my system. I can say, we're going to be safe. I can manage this. And it's the most wonderful place to be in and not go out and have anxiety anymore. You know, it's worth all the work that you put into it. So I do gym to get more air into my system. And after reading all the details about depression last night, I realized too that we're not aware when we move slowly. Okay. And I went, okay, so then I need to be able to increase my, not inertia, that's when we're stopped, how much I'm moving and breathing. I have to be able to increase that in order that I'm feeling my body, my system feels safe, taking in more air for longer periods of time, and I'm able to move and feel safe. So that's why I go out and do a gym bike. You can do it at home if that's where you need to start, as long as you're aware, consciously aware, I'm retraining my whole system to feel safe with moving. Okay, so my whole system shut down. So for 2.5 years, I was bedridden and probably comatose most of the time. So my whole cognitive section shut down, and it's been a process of, well, first of all, we've not had this information before, of teaching myself how to be able to get up and do things again. Now, the other side of it is when you're doing the trauma-informed movement and the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex come back online, you're able to focus for longer periods of time throughout the day. So in the trauma-informed movement group, I said, this is months ago, I said, oh wow, I've been able to focus for a period of 7 hours. It's amazing. So what I will do today is go to gym, and then I'll come home and do trauma-informed movement. And then over a period of days, what will happen is the fog that you feel around your brain, you'll know that it goes. You'll feel it dissipate. Now, here's the challenge with complex trauma and doing something like this is we don't know we need it until after we start doing it. And then when we feel good, but then when our brain goes back to like I am now, because I've had a week of making myself rest, it's like, oh, I've got to do it, whether you like it or not. I need to do this so that I can feel comfortable in my own brain, in my own mind. It's not so fogged. And it's like, just let me at it. Sometimes it can be hard to say, right, I want to do this because I don't want to get to this stage again. But we know in the end that if we keep doing this and we keep training the internal aspects of our brain to work together properly, then when we go out, we're going to have less anxiety when the depression trigger hits, and it can hit out of nowhere. This is the thing, it's all unconscious. So when it hits out of nowhere, we're like, what the heck happened? I wasn't doing anything. But now we have a way that we can manage it. Okay, and tomorrow I want to talk some more about this, but about different parts of the brain that we can address, as well as the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. I want to go into other parts of the brain that when we change up the emotions in different areas, then we're able to also help our neurology and neuroception and everything come back online more fully, so that we get to go out and live a life that's full of life again, in a way as an adult that we've never been able to live along the way through childhood and so much more. Okay, I know it's a lot of information to absorb because we're talking about the brain and we can't actually see it. I keep meaning to get a model of a brain so that we've got a concept of it. I will get there, because all of this is so important, because our brain is like the motor that, runs so many parts of our body and ourself internally, that if we're not addressing it, then we're just going to stay on the same road, having the same talks about what's happening for us endlessly. And we can't. With complex trauma, we have to be doing movement. We've got to be not just the trauma-informed movement, but we've got to be able to see where next we need to move in order that we give our whole internal system new experiences, and we can increase what sensory information we're taking in, and that helps heal our whole system, our system as a whole. Okay, all right, thanks for joining in this morning, girls, and I will be able to see you again tomorrow morning before I go away overseas. Okay, bye for now.